Yeah, it's been a while.
Folks, we're just waiting for one more commission member. We'll get started shortly.
Nick Green's on vacation.
No
I
cell
saw
phone.
he's
We turn our microphones on.
All right, yes, let's turn on our microphones. We will call this meeting of the City Plan Commission, a regular meeting on Tuesday, July 19th at 5 o'clock to order. Let's take a roll call. We'll start.
Noel Sanchez.
Harry Bilodeau,
Chris.
Chris Potter.
Cheyenne Manager, Card DPD staff.
Alexis Thompson, DIS staff. Lisa Jennerman, Senior Assistant City Solicitor, as counsel.
Properties are DPD staff.
And I'm Michael Gazdaco, the chair. We will look to approval of the minutes from the June 21st, and the June 28th meetings. We received.
Yeah, so commissioners, you did receive the minutes for the June 21st meeting, and I think we're gonna need some more time for the June 28th.
I was going to say, I don't think I saw two, but so the June 21st meetings minutes were circulated. I hope you had a chance to review them. If there are any notes, edits, they can be put forward now. If not, we'll move to approve the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of June 21st, 2022.
Thank you. We have Christian as a second. All in favor of approving the minutes from June 21st, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, abstentions, the minutes are approved. Bob, do you have a director's report this month?
Nothing this month.
Good, then we will move right into the first agenda item, which is a city council referral number 3524. This is a zoning ordinance amendment that we started talking about a few meetings back, and I believe Bob and Alexis are going to help us through this.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm here with zoning official Alexis Thompson to run through this series of amendments that we are proposing. This is coming out of jointly out of the Departments of Planning and Development and Inspection and Standards. And these amendments are intended primarily to deal with issues that have come up over the past couple of years as we've been administering the zoning ordinance. As you all know, it's technical and complicated, and there are times when things are come to our attention that indicate that there are gaps in how the regulation works, things that aren't as clear as they could be. There are some technical changes that we think will make the ordinance function better and better align with the comprehensive plan. And then there are a couple of policy changes, mainly related to housing issues, and one specifically related to cannabis based on the recent changes in state law. So I'm going to turn it over to Alexis to kind of walk through some of these changes, not all of them. A lot of them are going to be self-explanatory. For those of you who are online, these changes are accessible on our website. There are a couple of minor things that are different from the version that's on the website and the version that we're going to be working off of, but nothing really substantive. There are some copies of the ordinance and a table that walks through them on the table here as well for folks in the audience. So Alexis, why don't you go ahead with your presentation?
Great. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. So as Bob noted, we're not going to touch on all of the changes that are in this proposed ordinance, but I'm going to run through a handful of the what we've designated as technical changes, and then I'm going to toss it back to Bob to talk about the larger policy items that are within this document. So starting with actually nothing technical as deemed by us happens until we get to page 3, which is in Article 12, the use article regarding uses. And I will begin with the use table, which is 12.1, the use matrix. And the first item is the addition of animal care facility as a permitted use in the M1 zone. And I'll just note that we've seen a few inquiries regarding animal care facilities in an M1 zone. We understand that the use often requires large spaces and that happen to be a characteristic of structures that we find in the M1. So that's the impetus is that we've had a lot of requests or a handful of requests for this use. Bob feels that it is in line with comprehensive plan to make that change. The second change to the use table that I'm going to talk about is the addition of warehouse as a permitted use in the MMU zone, the mixed use zone. And this addition of the permitted use is really trying to be consistent because we allow wholesale in MMU zones, and inherently there's a warehouse component to most wholesale uses. So it's an effort to be more consistent across the use definitions in the use table. The next change that we're looking to make is to 1202 in the principal use standards. H is contractor storage yard and outdoor storage yard. The change here is that we require specific screening around our outdoor storage yards, but this regulation requires a 10-foot setback of this screening. And we've found that is a pretty, it significantly takes away from square footage from lots where the entire use is outdoors. There's no building component such that the screening would be set back from the face of the building, for example. So, and the screening and landscaping required can fit into a smaller setback. So in an effort to give back some of the square footage of a piece of property to be used where that use is permitted, we're looking to change that setback from 10 feet to 3 feet and with a shrubbery component that we feel can fit within that 3 feet. I'll say, I'm going to run through these pretty quickly, but if there are any questions as I'm going, please feel free to pipe up, and obviously we'll take questions to follow. Next is related to the change to outdoor storage yard, and it's to add a use standard to materials processing. Currently, materials processing in this section of the ordinance just kicks to a required development plan review. That will not change. We're just adding language that's very similar to the outdoor storage yard language regarding screening requirements. So again, it's adding the standard that there is a screening requirement and keeping it consistent with what we've just talked about for outdoor storage yards. Again, materials processing has an outdoor storage element by nature, so we've linked these in that way and are trying to be consistent across the ordinance. Jumping to parking, I believe we're going to 1202V. So this is an interesting one, and we see it as a sort of fixing something or clarifying something, filling in a gap, we'll say. Parking lots, principal use parking lots in our zones require a special use permit. So applicants who would like to create a principal use parking lot in an R2 or R3 zone have to come to the zoning board and meet a set of criteria as decided on by the zoning board. However, there is we don't have regulations for, well, we have regulations for lot coverage in residential zones. As you know, you build a house, you have to meet certain coverage maximums for your building and your impervious. But when it's a parking lot and not a house, these are kind of thrown a little bit askew. Do you use the same standards? Don't you? And so there's a gray area there. So we've decided to clarify by adding a coverage maximum at 75%, which is allows for a fair amount of paved, impervious surface, but also builds upon what might be required for permeable buffer from neighboring lots in order to achieve that 75% maximum. So if there are questions about that moving forward, I'm happy to talk more about it, but I'll leave it there for the moment. Let's see, we are moving to 1202FF, which is for utility. Again, there are currently no use standards for utility, and it's in an effort to be consistent with other outdoor uses that require pretty significant fencing and screening, such as a storage yard or materials processing. We've added language that is a standard for fencing and landscaping. And I'll add to this that we've allowed fencing for utility to be 8 feet, which is greater than the typical 6-foot maximum for fences in most areas of the city. This is born out of a number of variance requests from utility companies that for an 8-foot fence that the zoning board has found in favor of as seem to be necessary for security and safety of the public. Protecting them from what's inside and keeping people out, both to protect assets, but also to protect people. So that's the background for that change. Let's see, on this page 4, I will lastly hit 1203C, which is about temporary mobile food sales. This is a pretty basic one. This has said generally that the term for a temporary use permit for temporary mobile food sales was going to be determined as part of the use permit. We've codified it by saying it's a year. It's a pretty standard term, so it just kind of takes the guesswork out of it for anyone approving those permits. Anybody have any questions so far?
Well, do the screening rules that you mentioned, are they going to apply also to the utilities?
Yes, the utility does require screening. Same, 1 shrub with a minimum of 3 feet in height, planted every 3 feet on center along a fence. Yeah. Again, we're really trying to be consistent with types of uses. There might be some differences, but as far as a category goes. Okay, I'm going to jump to Article 13 now, which is a site development category, which also handles garages, accessory structures rather, and a garage is one of them. So 1302, excuse me, J2 it talks about a detached garage. We're also seeing this as a change that fills in a gap. The way the language is written now, we allow part of garages or an area of a garage, I should say, to be a rec room or an office. But the way the language is written, it may have been interpreted that you needed to be able to park a car there as a garage in order to be able to use another part of it as one of those alternate office or rec room uses. So we're clarifying that you can use a whole garage as your rec room or your office. You don't have to have, it doesn't need to be qualified by having a car parking space in there. Let's see, I'm going to jump down to Article 14 in Table 14.1, which is vehicle parking space requirements. This again touches on animal care facility. And I think you all might be somewhat familiar with this. There's been conversation and recent experience before this commission that talks about the 1 parking space per 500 square feet for an animal care facility as being ending up in a pretty large overage from what is required for these types of facilities. I think you've heard a fair bit of testimony that is unnecessary in terms of number of spaces. Again, these facilities tend to be in very large buildings, so there's a lot of square footage, and that doesn't necessarily correlate directly to number of cars needing to access the facility. I'm going to move to 1406B, which is the design of off-street loading spaces. This is another one that I think that this commission has heard a lot about of late. What I'll say is that currently loading spaces are sized per the specs for like a big Mac delivery truck. Think of a giant grocery truck. And we feel that, that this is not necessary, and that the more typical delivery vehicle for residential apartment buildings is the standard size of an Amazon delivery van, which also correlates to in the code of ordinances, the size of what we classify as a commercial vehicle above a standard passenger vehicle. So that's the reason for the change in the size in 1406B. Last page of sticky notes, I promise, for me. Jumping to Article 16, which is the article dealing with signage in the zoning ordinance. And 1607D, which talks about electric message signs. So the first change that we're proposing is allowing menu boards for drive-through facilities and the gas prices part of signs at a gas station to be electronic. And this change is really just codifying something that is standard based on the modernization of menu boards and gas signs. I'm not sure anyone has seen someone out there with a pole changing gas prices in a while. So we're trying to just bring that into the modern era. And 1607M discusses scoreboards. So the first thing is that we've moved scoreboards into 1607, which is signs requiring a permit. It had been in 1606. And that we feel was in error because the signs, scoreboards they have foundations, they have electrical connections, they do require a permit to be installed safely. So we've moved it from 1606 to 1607. And then what we've done is what currently only the way the current ordinance is written, only the score part of a scoreboard can be an electronic message. So if you think about kind of an old school scoreboard, there's a bunch of fixed signage and there is a area where there's, time and score, and there's a grid of old light bulbs, and that's the part that can be electronic message, electronic. We understand that modern scoreboards are fully digital or electronic, and they thus have the ability to convey video. So we're trying to, again, bring the language into a modern era with respect to how scoreboards exist these days. And there's some specificity to that. We've in addition to allowing them to have more electronic message because they are one giant screen for all intents and purposes. We're also indicating that we're adding some language about them being oriented toward the field of play, such that that we understand what their purpose is. And I think, Bob, I'm gonna kick it over to you. Is that?
Yep.
Does anybody have any questions before I let Bob go?
I do. With regard to 1302J, what now constitutes a garage? If it's saying it doesn't have to have a car, does it need garage doors? I mean, what?
Well, that's a good question. We have existing structures, which are garages, and Bob, I think, is grabbing his book while I have this open here. But a garage is, typically intended to house a vehicle. And the ordinance has said for a long time that a part of a garage can also be used for other residential purposes, such as a home office or a recreational room. I don't know about other folks, but I have not stored a garage or a car in my garage at all times. Sometimes it's housing, your grandmother's furniture, or any other such thing. So what we want to do is allow people to understand that they can make a transition to their what was designed and built as a garage to be used other than to house a car. And we already allow for this. We're just saying that you don't need, to answer your question specifically, you could remove your garage door if you wanted to create your whole garage, your entire space as an office or a recreational room.
At what point does it cease being, just to be correct, shouldn't it stop being called a garage at some point? If you remove the garage doors and you put a rec room in there and your study and everything else.
You're absolutely right.
I just mean,
And I think that maybe we should talk about one item that is not on our list
Because
to
it's-
discuss tonight.
Go ahead.
Good. No, is that, there's a conversation about what a structure is that, so what I'll say is a garage is a permitted structure. And so we don't believe that we're expanding on what that is right now. We're also suggesting adding a definition of an outbuilding, which is an accessory structure that is not a garage nor a shed, because we have had a number of scenarios where there has been an inability to categorize a proposed structure. And I think a good example of that would be, recently I was asked about a pool cabana. And if someone has a pool and wants to put up a pool cabana, currently there's no good definition for that structure.
what
So-
about its primary and secondary?
But this also isn't going as far as going to like an ADU where you turn it into a dwelling unit separate and apart from your house, correct?
Currently, there is explicit language that does not allow kitchens or sleeping rooms in these accessory structures. there'll be much more conversation about that in the coming months, I think, as we all are aware of the
Yes.
changing state law. But we're not suggesting right now that any changes to that use.
I think that really, you should work on getting rid of that. A way to proceed beyond that terminology. If you're parking cars in it, it's a garage. If you're parking your body in it, it's a secondary structure.
It's
Because
true.
otherwise.
That's actually what we're intending to do with-
Precisely.
with this new definition of
See how
outbuilding.
smart I am?
Yeah, so garage would encompass the thing you park your car in. Outbuilding would encompass anything else,
Correct. And what I would say is an outbuilding. to distinguish-
except a residence at this point.
Precisely. And,
Yeah.
and the other differentiating factor is that if a garage has existed, it is allowed to be at 0 lot lines. We are not proposing that a new outbuilding could be built to the same 0 lot lines as a garage. If someone was putting up a pool cabana, we would require that they would be set back in a different way than garages are currently allowed to be set back. I would also add that any addition of any outbuilding still must meet all dimensional and coverage requirements. So setbacks, lot coverage, all of those things are parameters that are in place to prevent, too much proliferation of building on a property.
But doesn't that get you into a problem? You can build a garage right to a lot line, but you can't build an outbuilding to an outlet. I mean,
Currently, you
it
can't.
just happens that, I happen to think about these things with regard to garages. And so
Well, so I think, first of all, I think it's a reasonable public policy to say that a garage can be used for things other than storing cars. They're
Sure,
useful
sure.
structures
Correct.
on the property. At the same time, I think it's a good public policy to say that people should be able to build outbuildings in their yards for things other than storage of vehicles, especially, things like pool cabanas or, offices or things like that. People have land, they want to be able to use it to do things. So right now, we do have general standards that say that accessory structures have to be at least 3 feet off lot lines. There is going to be this slight discrepancy between the fact that you can put a garage on a lot line, but you can't put an outbuilding on a lot line, but you can in effect turn a garage into an outbuilding without having to move it off of the lot line. It's one of those things. Zoning has a bunch of things like that aren't entirely consistent, but we feel that this is an appropriate way to allow for the conversion of old things into for new purposes and for new things to be developed.
Which I applaud.
Yeah.
I'm happy
Yeah.
with it. I just mean,
We talked about
I think
that.
you're asking the right questions and they have, we've had lots of discussions along these exact lines. So I appreciate your questions.
okay, can I say one more thing, with regard to the gasoline station use of electronic sign. I totally applaud the idea for fuel prices only. I don't want television sets. I don't want boom boxes.
Correct.
I don't want.
Those won't be allowed.
signs.
Animation would not be allowed.
Okay.
Correct. The specific language is, and in the changeable portion of a gas station sign that displays fuel price. So highly specific.
Wonderful.
So solicitor suggesting maybe some qualifying language on that garage that says something to the effect that it can be converted. I think we want to, if that's something you want us to continue to wordsmith before it goes to hearing at the council, we're okay doing that. I'm not sure, sometimes you have to sit on something for a little while before you know that it's going to work properly, but
Yeah, I don't have the answer. I just have the worry. I can see.
I do
someone
too.
Building
Yeah.
right to the line and then saying it was a garage on Monday and Tuesday, it's a rec center and Wednesday. It's a 4-bedroom apartment.
Well, it can't be that.
It can't be that,
It can't be
right.
that.
But I will say that we've had a conversational precisely along the lines of this question. And I think to a certain extent, if someone was to propose to build a garage and then quickly change it to an outbuilding, there could be a couple things that are pretty clearly at play. One is access of a vehicle, right? If your intention was to build something for a vehicle, there are going to be other site elements that are involved and a review process surrounding that addition to the site, a driveway, a garage apron. So, this is not, I'm not saying it's not a possibility, but in the review of a site plan, intentions might become pretty clear.
I don't understand why the outbuilding can't be built to the lot line.
Well, that's another option.
Yep.
Is to simply allow that to happen. We were trying to be consistent with other non-garage accessory structures. But if you think that's okay, that one of the challenges with building to a lot line is you can't have windows on the lot line, but maybe that might be acceptable for some people.
There are building code issues that come into play too. There's
Yeah.
Where zoning allows 3 feet, often folks will design at 5 feet because the requirements for the wall assembly change at that point. So, but you're absolutely right, Bob.
Yeah.
It would change the architecture of them. There's also a maintenance question. Often garages are set at lot lines in the past, and people weren't thinking as much about being allowed on someone else's property to manage.
And the building next door becomes important. You have to have room to
You're not
serve it.
speaking.
I'm sorry.
Of the building next door becomes important because you have to have room to service things. And right now, I mean, I think the building that was just built next to our office may be 3 feet away. I know we have a beautiful Venetian blind that no one's ever opened in the last 3 months, but anyway, I don't know. I just worry things, that's all.
Yeah. All right, so I'll move into the changes that I want to talk about here. The first one is actually at the end of the spreadsheet. It's section 2001C. The first couple of changes I'm going to talk about relate to the ability to use property to develop more housing. In residential zones, what we say is that if you have a non-conforming use on a property, say it's a 3-family house in a 2-family zone, we've got hundreds of these conditions throughout the city. But let's say that the lot is really big, that it's big enough to even subdivide to get more than one compliant lot. Right now, you can't do that. This came up, I think it was last month or the month before, with Killingly Street. There were 2 houses in the R1 zone. One was a 2, one was a 3. They were on at least 15,000 square foot lots. Those cannot be subdivided because we say that decreasing lot area through a subdivision is considered intensification, and intensification of a non-conforming use is not allowed. So what we're proposing here, we think that that's overly restrictive. What we're proposing here is that on lots that are big enough to be subdivided, in other words, if they have enough lot area to create new house lots, even if there is a non-conforming use, that subdivision should be allowed. And so this would apply to lots in residential zones of larger than 10,000 square feet at least. So that's the first one there. Okay, next, following the comprehensive housing strategy that we put out a while back, there were a couple of recommendations in there that would promote development of housing. The first one I want to talk about is you'll see 2 lines that are highlighted in blue here. The first one's on the first page in table 4-1, and the second one is on the 3rd page, the last entry. And the last entry is the one I want to talk about first. There is a provision in our zoning ordinance that some of you are going to be familiar with, but many of you won't, which says that if there are 2 or more undersized lots in a residential zone that are next to each other and owned by the same party at any time after October 24th of 1991, and there aren't more than one principal building on those lots. Very complicated rubric to even get to this point. But if you meet all of these standards, those lots are considered to be merged, and they can't be developed separately. Even though they appear as 2 separate lots on the tax map, they get 2 separate tax bills, and there's nothing, there's no caution that anybody knows about that would prevent them from being sold independent of each other. Zoning still considers them merged. If you had this condition that existed in December of 1991, you sold one of those lots in 1991 and you still own one of them, 30 years later, come to find out that those lots legally shouldn't have been sold independent of each other. They're merged. This creates huge problems for us. Anytime someone comes in for a building permit to try and build on a small lot, Inspection and Standards has to research the deeds going back to 1991 to find out if they were in common ownership with adjoining properties. And when we find out that's the case, it's quite a shock to people who have been paying taxes and have expectations that they've been sitting on buildable lots for decades. Another thing that happens from time to time is someone stops paying taxes on one of those lots, it goes to tax sale, ends up in court, and there's a huge tangle of complexity when it comes to the ability to develop these lots, or even to figure out who owns these lots. We don't feel like this provision has really served us well, and it actually locks up many, many lots in the city that could otherwise be developed for housing. So our proposal is to eliminate this provision. So undersized lots would no longer be merged. Since we realize that some of these lots are very small and would have limited development capacity, because the ordinance would still require you to comply with lot coverage, impervious surface, parking, and so forth, they're going to end up with pretty small houses on them, which is not a bad thing either. But we also feel that we should put some restrictions on the height of these houses so that they're not overwhelming on the small lot. So that's what the change in table 4-1 would do. We would limit these on any lot that's 2,500 square feet or smaller. We would limit them to 2 stories and not to exceed 22 feet. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what this change would involve. I'll pause here for any questions that folks might have about this.
Well, I endorse it, frankly. I mean, you're increasing accountability accurately. I mean,
Right.
But I hate to, you can imagine your description of going into court with that would be horrendous.
And I think we've discussed this one before.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a change that needs to happen.
Okay, so that's
I just have a technical question,
sure.
and I mean like computer technical. How many of these lots are there, and how hard would it be just to go through all of them?
Well, okay, so it's a good question. We have actually a Brown University student in a GIS class took a stab at trying to figure this out. It's as far as we know, it's in the hundreds, not in the thousands. So in the realm of hundreds of lots. However, many of these are going to be so small that you'll never see any development. You can't, believe it or not, we have lots that are 20 square feet, 30 square feet. As a practical matter, anything smaller than 1,500 square feet is essentially undevelopable. The challenge is we can know what ownership is today using GIS, but we can't know if lots have been in common ownership between October of 1991 and today. That requires manual deed research to figure it out. So to the best of our knowledge, it's in the hundreds, give or take, because of ownership that might have changed over the years, pushing it towards a higher number, but on the other hand, a lower number, given that if the question is how many buildable lots are there, it would be a number that's lower than in the hundreds.
I can say that I've had these cases in court and they aren't pretty. And they aren't pretty because not only do they go back so far, but there can be one or two purchases between 1991 and now. And the city then has to go back and research, and it's if at any time they were owned by the same two people. And so you may be now on the third owner who has absolutely no idea that that lot was merged. And honestly, I don't really think it's fair, but the court enforces it because that's the way it's written. And that's the way, the legislature has provided where to enforce.
And I think we discussed this the last time this was brought up at the CPC here. If this was enacted and it took hold, it would automatically make that null and void, where that would be no longer the case. It would no longer be the law, and there would be no further issues. It wouldn't take any action on behalf of the owner or anything along those lines.
That's correct.
I might add, whenever these issues come in front of the zoning board for variances, the zoning board grants them. And should we be putting, and the challenge is that sometimes you're dealing with two owners that don't know each other. They both have to be signatories. It takes a lot of cooperation for this to happen. So this, we think, is the cleanest way to deal with this situation.
I'm just thinking from a tax policy standpoint, like the non-buildable lots. That isn't that like,
I'm under
we're
the,
talking hundreds.
but I believe this doesn't affect anything tax related. They're still getting the same tax bills.
Well, that's
They
what I
still
mean. Like,
look
why are people paying separate taxes for a contiguous non-buildable lot? Like,
Which
that's
is
what-
part of
that's
the
what I-
frustration when they find out that they're unable to build.
They've been paying taxes for all these years. Yeah.
You can imagine the greeting we get when we have to say no.
Would it make it easier if you said that there was a buildable, you've said there's a certain buildable size, so if something's merged and the second lot is less than 1,500 square feet, then it's never going to be built on, you're saying. So why not take those and just have it, get it,
Take them off the tax roll.
Well,
I
this
guess
still,
so, yeah. somehow.
they're already on as I'm understanding. It's not changing anything from the tax department whatsoever. You still separate deeds.
No,
It
but
would,
I
it would
mean, that
require action to
just-
merge them
Just
now.
permanently to say, okay, here, Bob, here's your you have this extra lot with 500 feet. It's never going to be developable. So it's part of your land, part of your property.
I think the way the subdivision law is written, that every single one of those would have to file for an administrative subdivision to merge. And the city's not going to do that on their
Oh.
behalf. Yeah.
I don't, I just agree with Chris. There must be some simpler answer, but maybe this is it. Just dictate.
This is a pretty clean answer, in my
Good.
opinion.
All right.
Okay, so the next one, I've got two more to talk about here. The next one is in purple on your spreadsheet. You'll see on the first page in table 4-1, and then in the third page in section 1410 B7. Okay, this is another issue that we've been talking about for some time. You have seen a number of cases where developers who wish to build multifamily housing at a particular density come to you with petitions to change the zoning of lots to commercial zoning, with a footnote that says it's commercial zoning, but it's limited to residential uses. This is a device that we've had to adopt because our commercial zoning is very flexible in terms of its allowance of density, and in some cases, it's not requiring parking. And it's the only tool we have that gets at that allows you to build an apartment building that we're seeing a lot of in the city. We have a multifamily zone called R4 that has proven to be not very useful at all when it comes to production of multifamily housing because it requires too much land and it requires too much parking. So we feel that R4, the regulations of R4 should be changed to be closer to the regulations of the commercial zones, but still retain many of the same types of regulations for the residential zones. So first of all, what we would propose is to remove the lot area per dwelling unit requirements from the R4 zone so that the number of units you can put in a building is dictated more or less by the zoning envelope that's allowed in the R4 zone. And then also similar to what we do in commercial zones, we would say that lots of 10,000 square feet or less in the R4 zone would not require parking. Now, unlike the commercial zones where you can build lot line to lot line, there's no restriction on lot coverage, no restriction on pervious versus impervious surface. In the R4 zone, as with all of the other residential zones, we would still have maximum lot coverage requirements, maximum impervious surface requirements, and setbacks from lot lines. So what you would see with the R4 is a scale that's similar to the scale. In fact, the height is the same with the R3 zone as with the R4 zone, 45 feet. But it would allow for multifamily dwelling. We imagine that this could be applied, and keep in mind, this can only be applied if the city council says that changes the zoning map. So it's still at the discretion of the council, but it's a more flexible zone that could be applied to existing buildings, like for example, the River Avenue, that former school that we had to just came in last time. We changed it to C1 with the footnote. R4 would be a perfect designation for that because it's a residential building. So it could be applied to existing buildings or to vacant lots so that multifamily housing could be developed. So that's I would say probably the most significant change out of all of these in terms of a policy shift, but it's a policy shift that you've already kind of made, and the council has already kind of made by using the C zone as I've described. Any questions about that?
What would be the process of applying this zoning to the existing buildings once this is enacted? It would be city council going parcel by parcel, or
Yes.
recommendations by the planning department, like some of these projects that we've recently approved as a commercial zone with residential footnote.
In virtually every case, it would be initiated by a petition from a property owner that gets reviewed by the city plan commission, advisory to the council, and then gets heard by the council and ultimately voted on. We are not proposing any map changes as part of this. If at some point, we do a study with a lot of community engagement, and that study concludes that some areas should be rezoned to R4 to reflect existing nonconformities or to activate land in a particular way for multifamily housing, that's a possibility, but we're not even contemplating that at this moment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the last change I want to address, and by the way, just to speak to this issue of accessory dwelling units, the state has changed the law with respect to accessory dwelling units, making it much more, giving communities much more flexibility in how they want to accommodate accessory dwelling units. We talk about it in our housing strategy. We're still kind of absorbing what the state law says and how we want to go about doing it, addressing issues of, accessory dwelling units in outbuildings and how they might be located proximate to lot lines and how you deal with students and how you deal with short-term rentals and so forth. So we're not ready to talk about this yet, but I think it's something that we want to bring up in the future. So I just wanted to say that. The last change is also prompted by a change in state law, and that's to the cannabis regulations. And these proposed changes appropriately I've shown in green on your spreadsheet. The state law, as everybody knows, has been changed such that in Rhode Island, there can now be retail sales of cannabis for adult recreational use. And what the General Assembly said was that communities that currently are not hosts to compassion centers are allowed to have referenda on their ballots to decide if they want to have recreational retail sales in their community. But the Assembly said, and the governor signed this bill, they said that if a community already hosts a compassion center, it must accommodate retail sales for adult recreation. So what we are proposing here, and maybe this is a stopgap for the moment, but I think it's important for us to do it. What we're proposing is saying that any place that currently allows for compassion center and or cultivation center will also be allowed to have adult recreational sales. So all we're doing is changing wherever we say compassion / cultivation center, we're adding retail sales. And I'm going to see if I can find this quickly. Some of you will recall that we have a map that we produced a little while back that shows where we currently allow for cannabis facilities. We allow it in the M1 zone and in the C3 zone by special use permit. A little while back, there was an amendment to the ordinance that prohibited these establishments within 1,000 feet of schools and within 3/4 mile of existing facilities. So I'm going to just share my screen and show you what that map looks like. So you can get a sense. Now I think I have to drag this map into this screen. Hopefully folks online are going to be able to see this, but you can see it in the room. So what you can see is we've drawn these buffers around existing compassion and cultivation centers. We've also drawn the smaller buffers around schools. And what you can see is that there remain a handful of areas within the city where you could still have the use. So once again, we would be proposing simply to add adult recreational retail sales to this definition, and they'd be allowed where other cannabis facilities are currently allowed.
So would this have could this have the unintended consequences of kind of creating a barrier of entry into the space? Because it's basically saying only existing people would be zoned to have, except for those very small places.
No question about it, and I think the council was cognizant of that when they passed the regulations about these buffer zones that took away considerable amounts of land where you can have these facilities. So yeah, I think the answer is yes. There are absolutely barriers to entry because of the current regulation. And what I was trying to do here is sort of if the state is mandating that we accommodate recreational sales, I just wanted to sort of keep it status quo and until and unless we wanted to have a bigger conversation about whether we should be allowing retail recreational cannabis to be sold in other areas. But yeah, it's a totally fair point. Okay, so with that, that ends the presentation. And I'd be happy simply to walk through the staff report very briefly, and then
I think that would be great. And then
Perhaps
we
you
can
could
open
open
up
it
to public comment.
Yeah. Okay, so in our staff report, we give an overview of the changes we just talked about. And as with all zoning changes, your action is advisory to the city council, and you need to make findings that the zoning changes are consistent with the comprehensive plan and with the purposes of zoning. And we have enumerated several sections of the comp plan and purposes of zoning in our staff report. And we advise you to recommend approval of the amendment to the city council, finding this amendment in conformance with the comp plan and with the purposes of zoning.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Right now, it's the time in the agenda item where we move to public comment. If you're joining us online, please raise your virtual hand at the bottom middle of your screen, or if you're dialing in, press *1 to raise your virtual hand if you're dialing in. And we will start here in the room because Attorney Tights has been itching to get a crack at this, and no one likes talking about zoning amendments more than Attorney Tights. So let's start with you, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I know I'm not,
Andy,
but
would
you
you
want me
mind-
over there?
Yeah.
Sure.
There's a microphone there.
Yep.
Did you check? Yeah, just turned it on.
Thank you. I know I'm not number one, I'm number two here, but I have to actually go off to another meeting.
Understood.
So thank you for doing. Am I on? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So I'll be quick. Key thing I'm concerned about is what Alexis was talking about, which is on page 6 of the amendments, section 1607 and the scoreboards. And I think she accurately described the problem when she pointed out that modern scoreboards are fully digital. But I don't think the solution is here. By using your electronic message sign language, which has this very specific requirement of 8 seconds per image, it really doesn't deal with that problem that modern scoreboards or video. And you already have a few in the city that I know of. The Brown University one at the football stadium, which predated the electronic message board regulations. The Providence College scoreboard. They're already there, they're video screens. And then if you think of what you see either on TV or in real places with scoreboards and whatnot, and I think the most common thing we see are replays of a particular play. You can't do that with a static image of 8 seconds. First of all, you're not really seeing much, just the static image. And second of all, 8 seconds go by and the game's already going on. So what I would suggest is just if you added to that sentence.
Andy, excuse me
Not to cut
just
you off.
for a second. I don't know if you have today's draft.
I don't. I didn't know there was a new draft today.
Yeah, it's right here. We added, after we say the scoreboard may be an electronic message sign and may convey video.
Oh, okay, thanks. That's easy. Sorry to take your time. Second thing, I'll just be very quick then, while on the same page, section 1904C. That's a minor thing about just clarifying that primary and secondary educational facilities are not land development projects. And I would say, yes, that's a good idea. I can't tell you how many discussions I've had with, as you know, with you, with staff and with members of secondary schools trying to figure out, should we come as a development plan review or a land development project? And this is much better to clarify that. And then the final thing is just on the policy about the R4 zone. And I think it's great to increase the density on the R4 zone and have, drastically change the lot area per dwelling unit or eliminate it completely. I think even too, if you want to minimize the parking and cut the parking requirements, but I think you're using the wrong tool in the toolbox by applying that 10,000 square foot lot exception. And as someone who's represented clients who have taken advantage of that 10,000 square foot exception, I think it's just a broad tool that can have negative effects to provide no parking whatsoever. And it's so arbitrary between, the lot that's 10,000 square feet and the lot next door to it, which is 10,500 square feet. So I think it's better to not include it in that exception. If you really don't want to have any parking, even then apply it across the board. If it's a 20 or 30,000 square foot lot, they shouldn't have to have parking either. Or maybe you decide that you'll cut the parking in half. I know it's a goal, it's part of the plan's goal to get away from private cars in the city. But unfortunately, particularly after COVID, I don't think we're yet a carless society or going to be for a while. We're going to be maybe an electric car facility and people will have less cars, but I think there's still going to be a fair amount of cars. And that would be a better way to handle it than just dumping it into that 10,000 square foot exception. Thank you. And I'm open to any questions for 2 more minutes. If you have any questions, I'm available.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
The next person who was written on here first is Tanessa Azar.
I'll take this, I guess, in case my section's changed too. Save everybody time, I don't know.
Sometimes there are last minute edits.
It hasn't. The loading dimensions, no.
No, still good, okay. Tanessa Azar from Moses Ryan. I just want to talk about one section. I did submit written comments, so I'll keep it fairly brief because I know you guys have those, just a high level. So this is section 1406, and it's a pretty significant reduction in the loading space size. The area would go down about 47%, length 37%. They're pretty significant reduction. So our concern is that this wouldn't be functional for the city. If you look at bike spaces, you guys have bike spaces needing 7 feet of vertical clearance. Loading spaces will only need 3 more feet than that. Similar municipalities in the area, their spaces are much larger. The biggest thing though would be loading being forced into streets and sidewalks, hazards to pedestrians, vehicles, and wear and tear on the city streets and sidewalks. So we'd ask that you wouldn't recommend that change to the ordinance. And that's the only section I have comments on. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. That is the last person here in person. I'm assuming we have some people online who would like to speak.
Yep, we have Brendan Herr from Union Studio. Go ahead, Brendan.
Hi, my name is Brendan Herr. Sorry, my identifier identifies my employer, and in no way am I representing my employer here, and this is my personal opinion.
Understood.
I was unable to change that. I'm Brendan Herr. I'm an architect. I live here in Providence, and I had one comment about the height limit proposal for the small lot areas. My opinion is that height limit is way too low. It's actually very out of context if you look at existing small lot homes and properties within the city. Fox Point is the part of the city I'm most familiar with that has a lot of these small lot homes. And doing a very quick survey with the city GIS viewer, looking at lot sizes and estimating building heights with Google Earth, the overwhelming majority of these properties have heights in the 30 to 35 foot range. And I think that there's great potential for development of these small lots within the city because they are quite abundant, although the city doesn't have quite a handle on how many or what size or what their neighboring context is. And I hope that 22-foot height limit could be modified. I think 30 foot, even 35 foot is a much more appropriate limit for those small lots. And that is my only comment. Thank you.
Please stick around. I believe Mr. Azar would like to ask you a question quickly.
Yes, of
Yeah,
course.
thank you. Thank you, Brendan. I assume you're an architect. I don't know if you mentioned that.
Hi, yes, I am. I am a licensed
Yeah.
architect.
So I appreciate the comment. What we were suggesting was that these, for very small lots, and we're talking about 2,500 square feet and less, that this would kick in. So anything more than that, you would be allowed the 3-story height that's typical of the residential zones. But what we were looking at is very small lots, 1,500 to 2,500 square feet. And what I thought I saw, and Alexis and I had this conversation, was that in a lot of these cases, what you see is a 2-story cottage on one of these very small lots. And so that's what we were getting at. I think that we run the risk with some of these very small lots of making them feel really cramped and overcrowded. And I don't know if you, in your opinion, would 22 feet and 2 stories be adequate for a cottage if that was our intention, for this to be for 2-story cottages?
And single family.
And single family houses as well, because these lots are so small that all you could accommodate under zoning would be single families. Would that change your opinion?
Yeah, well, I'll share a specific anecdote. One of my acquaintances owns a home in Fox Point, and I looked up the lot size. It's 1,360 square foot. It's a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house, but it's 31 feet tall. And it's a beautiful 100-year-old Victorian home. And
How many stories is it?
It's 2.5 stories. The eave line is about halfway up the 2nd story. So it has a lovely 12-12 approximate pitch. But when I know examples of the homes you're picturing, the small 1.5-story cottages, there are about as many of those around Fox Point as there are much taller ones that are in the 30 to 35 foot range, just based on my observations.
Bob, do you mind if I jump in for one moment? I just also, Brendan, thank you. And I appreciate you thinking hard about this. I think that some of what you're discussing are houses that are quite old and setback requirements were not in place. So the other thought process behind a height limitation has to do with proportional structures. And we now require side and rear setbacks, which would inherently make a footprint of a building not be able to max out the width of a lot, let's say. So that there's some serious thought and intention around the height related to a very small footprint that might result from setback requirements, and not wanting there to be a very skinny, very tall structure on a small lot. So I just want to give a little bit of background with respect to the thought process behind the suggested regulation.
And again, this is painting a broad brush for the entire city. There are pockets here and there that may differ, and zoning can't speak to every specific neighborhood and every specific lot. That's what, talented people like you and others do to come in and ask for relief when necessary and appropriate.
Yeah, the thing about the 22-foot height limit, I know where you came up with that number from. It's a little bit above the sidewalk, 9-foot first floor, 12 inches of structure, 8-foot second floor, and then a little flat roof structure. And that's such a prescriptive regulation that if these small lots do get developed, it's prescribing them to be built as a box. Because if you're doing this sort of cute cottage thing, you might end up with maybe a 2-bedroom. And, since the cost of lot acquisition and development and construction is so high, any development that happens on these small lots is going to definitely try to maximize value of construction. And it's going to push things into that just a big or no, very cute, small, very kind of vertical box instead of the, ideal cottage that reflects the, Victorian or colonial styles that we see around the city.
Well, thank you very much. We do appreciate your comment, and thank you for taking the time to speak to us today.
Michael, I think Brendan's brought up a really good point, and that is if you have a very small lot or a 1,500 square foot lot, then it's the size of the base of the house that ought to be the determinant, not just the height. I think the lightning splitter houses, for example, have small bases, have certainly those are 30 feet high, I'm sure. And a Cape Cod house with a steeply pitched roof, it's got to be in the
lightning
high
splitters
20s,
are in an R2 or R3 zone, I think.
including a foundation height and stuff.
I don't like, so what's wrong with a tall, skinny house? As someone who was tall and skinny for most of my life, I don't like,
You walk
I
down
get
that
what-
street.
I get what Brandon's saying. I think sometimes we have these intentions, and what you get is something very, like, do we want the entire city to look the same? Like, and from speaking from I was late because I have my boys. My boys are big, and if I want to move into the city, I'd like to be able to give them a little bit more space. And if 10 feet allows a full second floor, I'm 6'4"-ish, and my house now has low roofs, and I hit my head occasionally on some of the passages. So if I could get like an actual roof, ceiling height, like a nice ceiling height, and build a nice single family, why would, like, I just feel like this is
Well,
not for tall people.
If I would say if this is if you want to advise the council to raise that 22 feet, I'm not going to object. I would just say that what we're trying to do is to make density palatable. We don't want people to say that our regulations allow for things that are too big and out of scale, and that's what we were trying to get at. If it's somewhere less than the 45 feet, say, that's allowed in a R3 zone, but more than the 22 feet we're suggesting, I think we're certainly open to that suggestion.
How are you calculating 22 feet, right? I mean, from an outside foundation.
Yeah, a couple of feet off the ground for couple of stairs up to the first floor, and then call it 10 foot floor to floor.
Which is consistent with the requirements for residential, single-family residential houses, which require a 2-foot raise, a height level of the entry.
Yeah. Because it seems like the second floor would have to be built into a ceiling.
Unless, yeah,
And then,
yeah.
unless you had a flat.
So
You could do a flat roof and, you know, if this is like forcing people to do flat roofs, then
I think that's probably not what we're.
not what we're hoping, yeah.
You could also do a pitched roof with a gable, or I'm sorry, with a gable end and dormers. So I would argue that this regulation doesn't necessarily prescribe form, but I hear the argument for more height.
What would you suggest, Noel, being a builder and knowing how floor levels take, what each level
10 feet per
takes?
floor. If you're gonna have a 9-foot ceiling, and 10 feet per floor, and then.
And then
you
how
need
much
2
for the
feet to
roof
get
line?
off of the, well, a flat roof, you can do enough 2 feet, but.
Right, but if
pitched
we're
roof
hoping
with
for a pitch roof, you know, maybe you add another 5 feet, 10 feet to that.
Probably, I would say we'd go 35.
Yeah, let's
30,
do it.
Yeah.
30,
Let's do it.
35. 35 is a lot more than.
I wanna-
than
I wanna-
But I think what we're
Yeah.
trying to get away from is to include another floor of living space, right?
But it
Yeah.
does say 2 stories or X amount of feet, correct?
Yeah,
It does, correct.
you could say 2 stories. And leave it at that.
2 stories and leave it at that, but
It's
then,
just-
it
That's true.
falls under the, how would we define that?
The story 10 feet, 8 feet.
Well, no, story
it's-
is just.
stories
Story is
defined.
defined,
Stories are defined clearly in the ordinance.
so if we just remove the height and say 2 stories, we're still covered and no one will sneak in. a third.
There are, correct, they couldn't sneak in an extra floor. There are minimums in the building code. And if you did not have a height maximum, a story could be as tall as 1 decided for tall folks or.
You're gonna have 2 stories with a pitched roof and dormers, and then Chris's kids could live up there.
But I want ceiling fans too, so.
Yeah.
I haven't had the luxury of having a ceiling fan.
But I understand
Take off the floor.
the intent, because, you know, when you start talking about these small lots, you don't want a 45-foot structure there where it's not.
But I heard 22 feet, and I think they're all gonna be flat roofs.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
I
That's
think
a
if
good
you're
point.
looking at a 2-story building with a flat roof.
Yeah,
I don't think we want that.
No,
you don't, it's not, speaking of Fox Point, you don't.
so what we,
So if we could do it a
to
different way.
accomplish this, would you recommend 2 stories and to leave out the height, Bob and Alexis? Or would you recommend a different height, say 35 feet, so it's still under the 45-foot?
I'd say 2 stories not to exceed 30, and that's it.
I appreciate that recommendation, Harry. I think that based on this conversation, it would achieve what we would set out to do, which is to, you know, make sure that what is built is proportional to the size of the lot.
So a compromise of
Yeah.
30 feet?
Can we get 33?
Well, I think you,
31.9.
Noel can speak to, Noel as a builder could speak to it, but you get into, you know, there are standard there are standard floor to ceiling heights that result from building material standards, and you will probably end up with a pretty
I get it,
standard.
you know, like, we're talking about upper bound, so you could land underneath. I've just,
give us a number.
32. It's like, that's where I would go.
that's what I was.
32.
10 foot.
All right, done. 2
That's
stories,
on the pitch roof.
2 stories not to exceed 32.
32 feet, so
Okay. All right,
Chris needs
So
32 stories, 30 feet with a sunken first floor.
Or you could frame it on
Yeah.
12-inch centers and get
Yeah.
a skinny beam or something on it.
okay, we are still in the public comment section. So let's do one last call. I don't see any other hands raised in the virtual world. If you wanted to comment on this item, last call for public comment. And again, the same for in person. Any last comments that didn't get a chance to sign up? If not, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item. And therefore it's closed. All right. Any other conversation amongst us commissioners? We have that one revision that we can include in the motion if we are so inclined to recommend approval to the city council of these proposed changes. Noel.
On the section 1406, it's the one that was a comment was made on the height of the loading space.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know much about loading spaces, but I do know about the heights, and usually you'd have a platform that you back up into. And where does the height limit kick in?
Well, yeah, so here's our thought on loading zones. The regulation speaks to loading zones in general. If you're going to have a warehouse or some sort of facility that is going to need to accommodate vehicles, we believe that those facilities are going to be designed with a loading space and loading docks that are necessary for the use. What we were trying to get at is the fact that these loading spaces also apply to residential uses when the square footage of the building is 40,000 square feet or more. And the current regulation requires essentially that a tractor trailer be able to service a multifamily building or a multifamily building with a small amount of commercial. That's absurdly big, 15 feet high, 35 feet long. So what we were getting at was that we're talking about a minimum size. And so we were feeling that you're talking about, a delivery vehicle, a U-Haul truck or something like that. So that's the kind of size that we were talking about,
Do we know how tall those are? The panel
Yeah,
trucks?
10, they're 9 feet in height, typically, 8 or 9 feet wide. And, in the vicinity of 20 feet long is, so these spaces would accommodate that sort of vehicle.
Harry, did you have another question, comment? You looked like you wanted to chime in as well.
No, I just, I was going to talk to the same point that Noel did. I just don't want.
Oh,
Yeah,
speak into the
Mike,
microphone, please.
Sorry.
I was going to talk to the same point Noel did. I just don't want to do anything to exacerbate the on-street parking by loading and unloading vehicles. That's all. It's become, it's really become dangerous and it's prolonged. They don't just stop for 5 minutes.
And even when you do build loading zones, it's not necessarily
Right.
the
No,
case
I
that everyone
understand,
uses
but
them.
So I defer to his comment. Thank you.
Oh, I think I agree to the intent. A tractor trailer isn't normally going to be delivering to a multifamily building. It's more the commercial vehicle like we're proposing the change to be.
The section 1204, the cannabis,
Yes.
I am, something is not sitting right with me here. I think there are two different, they were legislated separately. I think they should be treated separately. We're creating a situation where, and I know that this is not us, but we're creating a situation where only existing businesses are going to be allowed into the industry. And I'd like to not make a recommendation that is in furtherance of that. I don't want these two things to be the cultivation centers and the recreational use to be treated the same in the zoning, because that gives the idea that they are the same. And this is a continuation of the fact that I think that these bills were designed to keep people out of the industry. So I would like to not recommend anything here at this point, or to recommend that we change this language to treat these things completely separately. Even if they, in practice, they are the same. I'd like to have it documented that they are separate.
So I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Bob, because I know that there's a legal issue that we need to apply a zone for the allowance of this because we have to have one on the books. It's a state law now. And I think this was intended mostly to be a stopgap until this issue was further studied and refined. Is that correct?
That was certainly our intention. There was a little working group that the mayor had assembled. We were talking about cannabis regulation. It hasn't reconvened. I do think that there needs to be a larger conversation around this, and maybe that can be reflected in your referral to the city council around this. I do think that, it's an advisory opinion, so the council is free to accept the recommendation or not. But if you want to get on the record misgivings you have about this, or if you want to point towards a different way of regulating and give them some advice, that's absolutely within your.
Chris, can a
Yeah.
motion be made to just take this out and then we'll discuss it at the next meeting?
Yeah, I would love to take this out.
Yeah, just make a motion and I'll second.
Right,
May I speak to a legal aspect, please?
No. Yes, you can.
That's a rhetorical question.
I know.
The way the cannabis laws have been written, the retail sales are not going to be licensed by the state for another year or two. So we have to have something in the meantime. I think it would be reasonable to say that this is the stopgap measure and to make a recommendation to the council and to commit to revisiting this once we see where the state is going, because we don't have control over who's going to be licensed. We can control where licensed facilities are going to be. So all we're saying, as I read this, all I see is our saying, okay, right now we have to change our law to allow it. So we're going to let the places we've already considered are appropriate in terms of zones to add this component. Once we see how the retail sales are regulated by rules and regulations by the Department of Business Regulation and the law becomes more clear, I think then it would be appropriate for the CPC to revisit this. I think otherwise we're in a total, we don't have enough knowledge to form another plan, and yet we're mandated to provide for it now.
And it's just applying.
Is that clear?
It's not applying the allowed, this used to be allowed where it's currently licensed as that facility. It's the zones that they're allowed in.
But see, that's my exact point. So my point is, no matter what that law looks like, right now, they can, if we put that in the same section, right? If we define the use as the same. Right now, our zoning only allows people to be licensed in the areas that they already exist. So no matter what the law says, in practice, right now, if we don't say these two things are separate and they will be zoned separate, right now, then in the future, we're gonna have a situation where they're zoned in the same places. We saw this Huntington Park, and then there's like 3 other little tiny things. Where like, who do we like? Is there a business there? Is there an open space there? Is there a lot there? So we're basically saying the people that own the cultivation centers are going to be the only people, no matter what the licensing says, they'll be the only people that have that through zoning that can open a retail facility. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, even implying that that's the case, because I'm not comfortable that the legislation was written at the state level or at the local level in a way that was written by clear actors. And all I'm saying is I, as a community member, would like to say, these two things are different. They will be zoned different. And then if you want them zoned the same, then we can talk about zoning them the same after we know more. I don't want to default to the thing to say that, hey, we're gonna treat them through zoning the same. And then then later on, you know, when we figure things out, we'll separate them. I just don't think that would happen. I say if we separate them now and then later on, you guys want to merge them, then let's merge them.
Where would you suggest they be applied then? Because they have to be applied now.
They should have a separate use definition.
Well, I think it would be difficult for us to kind of go through every zone and consider where they might be applied at this very moment. But, you know, I'd be comfortable if you were to say that you advise against this change and advise I guess the question is what's going to be the mechanism to decide, you know, does the mayor convene this working group again, or does it come back to us and you to sort of decide to give guidance? I mean, if you want to try and punt on this for a little while we kind of think about it, you know, as the solicitor said, they're not going to be licensing anything soon. We were just trying to get ahead of this because there was a change in the state law.
I also have a feeling that this, and not to interrupt you, Bob, I apologize. This can be the furtherance of this conversation will definitely happen around the comprehensive plan that we're discussing changes to as well. But I think, I mean, if the mayor already had a working group that's kind of dormant, that should probably be reactivated for this to continue to study it. And maybe that's the recommendation we make, is that we advise against the change and advise the mayor to reconvene his working group on recreational marijuana.
I would make that motion.
I'll second that motion. I like the use of word marijuana too.
Oh, sorry, I used that
Phony
instead of
cannabis.
Candace.
No, cannabis, cannabis.
So that sounded like it was a motion to approve incorporating the findings of fact and recommendations with the additional language about the Compassion Center, Cultivation Center, and recreational that you just mentioned.
In addition to the height
2
change
stories, not to.
Two
exceed
for the
stories.
small lots.
Right. 2 stories not to exceed 32 feet.
Correct. 32 feet.
32. Thank
All
you.
right, so it sounds like we have a motion on the table. And we had a motion, we have a second. And all right, we'll go around. Yay or nay?
Yay.
Noel, Harry,
Yay.
and I'll vote yay. All right. Recommendation passes. Okay, we'll pause for a 5-minute break, just to allow everyone to stand up and use the restroom real quick, and then we will go right into agenda item number 2. Oh, well, actually, before we go to break, sorry about that. Did you pause Zoom yet?
Nope, I have
Okay.
not.
We'll call up agenda item number 2 because I believe this one's going to be quick.
Mr. Chairman.
This is agenda item number 2, which is a public hearing, case number 21-035 MA 659 to 663 Admiral Street and 22 Gloucester Street.
Mr. Chairman, Dylan Conley on behalf of the applicant, we're requesting a continuance to the next meeting.
Can I address that?
Yes, sir.
The next meeting is full and it's probably oversubscribed at this point. So I don't know that that's something we can guarantee. I think the commission's here and ready to consider this. I mean, it's up to you guys and it's up to the applicant, but I just want to say if you do continue it to next month's regularly scheduled meeting, it may have to be continued again because we've given assurances to other applicants that they're going to be on that docket.
Would you be willing to continue to not a date specific?
No, because it would have to be a re-advertisement underneath that program. So I do need a date specific.
Yeah, and so two things. What I would recommend is that you can continue it to a date certain, which would be next month, without a guarantee that it'll be heard. You may have to continue it again. But I would also ask that the applicant agree that the clock is stopped.
No
And
objection.
that would be August 16th. 4:45 in this room.
So we have a request from the applicant to continue this item to August 16th with the understanding that the time clock has stopped and that there is possibly an oversubscription to the August 16th meeting, which means there is a potential that it will be continued once more. And the applicant is amenable to that.
Make a motion to accept.
So moved.
We have a so moved from Christian,
Second.
second from Noel. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Your continuance is granted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we will take a 5-minute break before we get on to agenda item number 3. Thank you. Okay, thank you. We will reconvene the regular meeting of the City Plan Commission. And we'll roll right into our next agenda item, which is agenda item number 3. It is a major land development project, case number 22-033MA. It's 116 Waterman Street and 382 Brook Street. The applicant is here, and please introduce yourself and pick it up. Attorney Gary.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, John Garrity on behalf of the.
Sorry. Let me have Choi on give a brief introduction first.
Sure, yeah, commissioners, just for, just a quick introduction before we turn it over to the applicant. So this is a site that's located on the corner of Waterman and Brook Street, 116 Waterman and 232 Brook Street. It's currently composed of 2 lots and occupied by 2 residential dwellings that will be demolished. And the applicant is proposing to construct a 5-story building, mixed use, with mixed use on the ground floor, with, commercial provided on the ground floor, as well as residences on the upper 4 stories. So in constructing this building, the applicant is seeking a dimensional adjustment for height. They will be exceeding the height limit of the C2 zone. You'll be providing a total of 25 residential units for a height of 61 feet and 5 stories. And they're also asking for a design waiver from the requirement that no residential use be located within 20 feet of a main street. And based on the ordinance, this portion of Brook Street as well as Waterman Street are considered main street. So I think the applicant can provide us more detail.
Back to you, Attorney Gary.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, John Garity on behalf of the applicant, Walter Brownhart. Couple of procedural matters, if I may. First of all, for the record, I presented to Troyan an affidavit of mailing with respect to the notice that this matter was advertised in the Providence Journal on July 12th for this hearing today on July 19th. And the affidavit also included notices of the mailing to property owners within 200 feet of the subject property. I will also note for the record, and at the suggestion of staff and a worthwhile thing to do in any event, we have had 2, if I may call them, neighborhood meetings with respect to this project. Councilman Gonzalez has a Ward 1 remote meeting at which we attended and made a presentation at that. The College Hill Neighborhood Association also invited me to make a presentation with respect to this project a week ago or so. So we did outreach to both of those so that the residents would be aware of this hearing and of the project itself. So I just want to note those for the record. As Troyan mentioned, this is a 25 residential units and a commercial unit at the corner of Brook and Waterman Street. It is in a C2 zone, which is permitted, multifamily is permitted. Troyan had indicated that the height, we are seeking an adjustment under the zoning ordinance. We are allowed an adjustment of 2 stories if we provide mixed use onto the property. We are provided a commercial use on the 1st floor. And as a result, we are seeking the adjustment of 1 additional story, not the 2 that's allowed, but 1 additional story. And we are also seeking a design waiver with respect to commercial use on the main street of Brook Street. We do provide commercial use on Waterman Street, the full width of Waterman Street with respect to the project, and a certain portion of Brook Street, the commercial use falls over to. There's also a stair tower within Brook Street, so that would be exempt from the requirement that there be no residential use or parking use on the 1st floor. And that back portion of Brook Street, we're seeking an adjustment, a design waiver, as we're allowed to do with respect to that space. So I have 2 experts here. Mr. Joe Casali is an engineer for the project, and Oscar Ramirez is the architect. So we'll go through a presentation with respect to the project itself, and then, of course, have any questions, if you have any questions after that.
Good evening, members of the commission, Mr. Chairman. Just for the record, my name is Joe Casali. I'm a registered professional engineer with offices at 300 Post Road in Warwick. With me is Bill Lavery from my office and also Oscar Ramirez from John Aronian's office. If I may, Mr. Chairman, allowing us to share the screen. We have a quick PowerPoint presentation. We'd like to incorporate the engineering and the architecture. And then, of course, we'll both be here if there are any questions of you or members of the commission. Thank you. You can see by, first off, that, you know, that the building, I think the rendering is beautiful. It's quite captures the intent of the applicant and fits nicely within the city. But let's discuss, Mr. Chairman, first.
Mr. Casali, could you just make sure you're speaking into the microphone? I just want to make sure everyone who's visiting us remotely can hear you. It is on. You just kind of need to speak more into it.
So we have Thayer.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Brook Street, of course, Waterman, and then as Shoyan stated, these are the two subject parcels, both in Assessors Plat 12. Lot 260 is a smaller piece, just shy of 2,500 square feet. And lot 180 is a little bit larger, about 3,600 square feet. Both of them are in your C2 commercial district, and both of them are in the IE3, the Educational Institutional Overlay District. So the applicant, it's our proposal to you tonight that we would like to raise the two existing buildings, the multi-story residential and mixed-use building that exist on both lots. When we eliminate that interior property line and merge the two lots, it'll give us one parcel about a little bit larger than 6,000 square feet. We understand the 0 to 5 build to zone, and that you'll see the building meets that requirement on all three frontages. You can see that the building takes up most of the 6,000 square feet. This is a mixed use building. It's 5 stories, as Attorney Garrahy said, 25 residential units and 1 commercial space. And I'll get into the architecture a little bit deeper in terms of the program. Again, the building, as we would see it looking on Waterman, and you can see that first level plan where, as Attorney Garrahy said, that commercial space, that 1,100 square feet takes up the entire frontage on Waterman. And it has its own commercial access from Waterman. Unlike the residential access, which will be on the opposite side in Phones Alley, which will have an Phones, F-O-N-E-S. You're welcome. Which will have access to that elevator that will take us to all the respective floors. This particular floor has 4 additional residential units, the smallest being 800 square feet and the largest being about 866 square feet. Below that, in the cellar plan, we have 1 unit. That's a 2-bedroom unit. It's about 800 square feet. And you'll see the other amenities, and I'll get deeper into the trash in a minute. Utilities, a small gymnasium, a communal space, and the bike space for the 10 spaces of bike. The typical level, which are levels 2, 3, and 4, are very similar in layout. They have 2-bed units anywhere from 800 square feet up to 1,000 square feet. And then, of course, the final and the top level is the rooftop area, which has about 2,100 square feet of program. You can see the elevation, the eastern elevation that you'd see on Brook Street, the northern elevation, western from Phones Alley, and that southern elevation from Waterman Street. In terms of parking, as you know, Mr. Chairman, because the lot is less than 10,000 square feet, and in this particular zone, parking is not required. We are not able to provide parking with the layout proposed, but the code does require 1 bicycle space per every 5 dwelling units. 5 spaces per this program layout is required. 10 will be provided in that lower level cellar plan. In terms of trash, everything will be down in that cellar. It'll then be, able to be put up from the elevator to the first floor and taken out in on Phones Alley. In terms of landscaping, where was a large street tree that is dead, that's right in front of the Waterman Street frontage. And so we would like to remove and replace that. That street tree will garnish us more than the 15% of the canopy that would be required. In terms of water, we have water mains on both Waterman and Brook Street. We're going to take our domestic and fire protection right off of Brook Street. It's a 6-inch cast iron. We do have a dedicated sewer line, which will be able to take all of this effluent right through into the Bay Commission line. And gas is also available, which we will take advantage of on Brook Street. And most importantly, from our end, we have a dedicated city drain line that will be able to tie all of our drainage in. Again, being such a small lot, about 6,000 square feet, exempt from drainage. We've traced that drain line all the way south, ultimately, as most of them do in the city, discharge to the Providence River. In terms of utilities, we currently have a transformer pad on a budding property that we own. Until we further detail with Narragansett Electric, the plan today is to just have an easement that allows that, but we're hoping with better detail with National Grid, we'll be able to bring that transformer closer to our program. And lastly, just in terms of to tie this together, we're here tonight before you, Mr. Chairman, for our master plan approval. As staff suggested, we have a dimensional adjustment for the additional height from the 50 feet to the 61 feet, as well as the stories from a 4th to a 5th story. And we're also requesting the design waiver because we have residential within the 20 feet of Main Street, which is on Brook Street, as you see. In essence, if we should receive approval tonight, we still have a ways to go with your city engineer and city traffic, city forester. Will be before the Bay Commission, the Providence Water Supply Board. And if we get through the quasi and state agencies, we'll be back from this commission for preliminary plan and with respect, asking for our final plan to be delegated to your planning staff. One other item is that I didn't incorporate. We understand that there is a 10-inch overhang into the right of way and up to a 2-foot 11-inch overhang into the right of way on Brook and Waterman. We will be seeking approval from the DPW for any proposed overhangs into the right of way. Again, as I say this all the time, I know that was a lot in one breath, but Oscar and Bill and John and I are here to answer any questions of you or members of the commission, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So that's your presentation?
Yes.
Great. All right. I guess with that, we will go around and see if any of the commissioners have questions of the applicant before we hear the staff report and open up to public comment. Any questions at this time? You can always reserve the right to call them back and ask questions later.
I had 2 questions, really. One is probably outside of my purview, but maybe Mr. Garrity could address it. Is the owner involved in the Wayland Square Merchants Association? Excuse me, the what's it called, Thayer Street Merchants Association at all? You know?
District? Do you mean the management district, Mr.?
What?
Do you mean the Thayer Street Management District?
Yes, yeah, Thayer Street Management District, yeah.
I don't believe he is.
Okay. I just wondered, and the other, you know, it seems to me that Phones Alley is potentially an incredibly important element to increasing the success of the Thayer Street area. And I guess I just wonder also whether there's been any discussion of plans for Phones Alley at all, that's all. I know these are both outside of your purview, John. I'm just saying, be great to when we see you again, I'd love to know if there's any thoughts about Phones Alley and about the Thayer Street Merchants Association, what's it called? Management Association, yeah.
When, Mr. Mills, when you talk about Phones Alley, are you talking about improvements to Phones Alley?
Yes,
and
yes.
Public improvements,
Yeah,
and curbing?
Yes.
and-
Yeah. Just, I think that the Thayer Street area, which I'm very familiar with, could improve radically if Phones Alley was actually perhaps developed instead of just a little alleyway, that's all.
The facade that you're showing in the building elevations for the north elevation would be the one facing Phones Alley, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you stated that your trash pickup would be via Phones Alley?
Yes. Because that'll be the area that will have access, correct, to the lower level. Yes, correct. So the basis of design was not because of any particular street, it was just in terms of the elevation.
Mr. Chairman, if I can address that, and there were several questions at some of the neighborhood meetings about the trash and the unsightliness of those trash containers out on the street. And I think one of the benefits of this program is the trash room, and that you're able to have a modern facility that has a trash room where it's stored and where it's kept and where it's not on the street, it's not outside where my trash cans are kept, unfortunately, but I think that it's kept away from sight. And I think the program is, and Oscar, maybe you want to talk about it, is to be able to maintain it in there and then to be able to use the abutting, to take it out onto Phones Alley, either through the elevator or through the side of the building itself, which faces abutting property of the same applicant. So there is a real benefit to the trash room and not having those containers. And, there's substantial 25 units, 26 units here. So there's substantial trash. And I think the intention is, and Oscar helped me with this, is to have a compaction system within the facility itself in order to compact the trash so that it's not, it's compacted and can keep a lot of trash, until the next pickup.
One quick question before you discuss the capability. You said the applicant also owns the adjacent parcel. Is that where trash is picked up currently, on the adjacent parcel as well?
The question is,
You said the applicant also owns the parcel next to it. And is that where trash pickup currently occurs for that adjacent parcel?
I don't know where the bad trash pickup for that adjacent parcel occurs, right? Oscar, you want to address that?
Yeah, so I guess going back to the trash on the building, I mean, we have a trash chute dedicated on each floor level that will then proceed everything down to the trash room, which would then lead to a compaction area for it. And that will allow the access through the elevator down to Phones Alley. And then I think even just going back to Mr. Harry's question about kind of dressing up Phones Alley, putting the public entrance on there kind of helps of that a little bit anyways, and tries to attract some of those residents to come in through Phones Alley.
I think all I'm getting at is I'm being a little greedy. I'm just saying, since you owe so much of it and you're adding so much value to the area, I hope you will look at the association that exists and also look at Phones Alley and just think about how much improvement it could enjoy and to your benefit. I mean, I'm just, I wish I were greedy enough to be in your shoes. I'm not, but I can be at least greedy with my ideas anyway. So that's all. I just hope that you become, you're a very powerful force. I hope you become more active in the Thayer Street Association. That's all.
Another question for the architect. So you're looking at this as a 4-story structure with a basement
4 stories with the cellar,
with a
5
cellar.
stories with the cellar, sorry.
So would you anticipate this building being fully sprinklered?
Yes,
And the trash chute would be the same. It would be probably a sprinklered and fireproof door and things like that per building code.
correct.
The trash chute would have to be sprinklered as well at each floor and with a fireproof door at the front.
Correct.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I did have a question about the overhangs. If you wouldn't mind going to that slide and describing what exactly is overhanging, that rendering it's not exactly clear from the rendering. So I was just hoping you could describe what's overhanging, and that's going to need a permit for an encroachment.
Yeah, so the portions that are overhanging are actually the balconies that are wrapping the building. And the largest, the 2'11", is the corner unit that has the corner balcony. Essentially, so it's a non-habitable space that's overhanging, sorry.
It's a non.
Habitable space that's overhanging the right of way.
So in essence, that red that you see on the site plan. Excuse me, in essence, Bob, that red that you see on the site plan, and I'll get to the Brook Street rendering, so you can see it programmatically.
There.
Yeah, so there you'll be able to see it along the sides.
So a portion, so it looks like a portion of those balconies extends out over the right of way.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. But not the sort of interior habitable space of the apartments.
Correct. That portion does not overhang.
Okay. All right. And that for the commission's benefit, encroachments, we consider balconies to be encroachments for habitation. Those are allowed to encroach over the right of way with permission of Department of Public Works.
So in essence, from the rendering, the cornice at the top here is about where the right of way ends. And so you can see that small, it's about 10 inches of overhang that's over the right of way, right almost onto over the sidewalk.
Be clear. They talk about the right of way. They're talking about the sidewalk, not the street.
That's right. The sidewalk is part of the public right of way.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Potter.
I have just a style thing in it, and I'm piggybacking off Harry here. That wraparound balcony on that corner is not, I mean, if I was living there, I'd rather have the apartment on phones. I'd rather even have a wraparound on phones, because that corner is busy. It's the computer science, the back of the computer science building there, and you know, a resident on the corner, like, it's not a great outdoor space. There's a lot of traffic right there. Just, I mean, this is, you know, it's not, I guess it's not our purview, but it would really, I think, wrapping it around the other side of the building would one, to Harry's point, you know, highlight phones at the front of the building, the front of the residence. And it's probably a more marketable amenity on that side. Just being a, you know, when I was at Brown, I spent a lot of time in that building, and it's just a kind of a dead corner.
Okay, any other questions from the commissioners to the applicant before we get into the staff report and hear public comment? Yes, sir.
Just, so we're at master stage, and you know, the comments are well taken, and this is master stage, so there could be changes at that. And I, you know, I would suggest that even though it's at master, it's, you know, it's a pretty complete package at this point. You know, there's a little bit more engineering and that type of thing, but you know, it's pretty much the program that's going to be proposed to you, you know, with some slight changes, or maybe architectural changes or those types of things. But again, we're coming back to you for preliminary approval at that point. So but this is not the last time you're going to see the project.
Mr. Casali, have you filed for those state permits yet? Or are you waiting for this hearing to do so?
Yeah, we're waiting to do so. In essence, there's no DEM permitting, there's no DOT permitting. It's just Providence Water, the Bay Commission, and the city in terms of engineering and traffic.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Vanilla compared to what you normally see.
A little shorter lead times. Okay, if there are no other questions from the commissioners at this point, we'll excuse the applicant for the time being. Thank you very much. And we will hear the staff report, and then we will open it up to public comment.
Right, thank you. And commissioners, this site is zone C2 on the.
Use the microphone, try it. Just bring it really close to your mouth.
Sure, commissioners. So this site is zone C2 under the I3E overlay, where mixed use I3E.
Okay.
I3E overlay where mixed use development is permitted by right. And the applicant has walked you through the building's design, and it conforms to the dimensional and design requirements of the zone. The materials that they will be using on the building facade are those that are permitted by right in this zone. As far as landscaping goes, they need about 900 square feet of canopy coverage, which they can achieve by planting one tree in the vicinity. And they can do this. We identify an opportunity by replacing a dead tree that is pretty close. And they are requesting a design waiver from the requirement that no residential be located within 20 feet of a main street. This property is a little bit unique because it fronts on two main streets. And they will be providing commercial use on the ground floor at Waterman. And, the building's design does conform to the C2 zone. So based on that, we recommend that you grant the design waiver. And so moving ahead, we find that this is consistent with the comprehensive plan as it conforms to objective H2 and is located in the neighborhood commercial mixed use development land use designation where this multifamily development and as well as mixed use is encouraged. The applicant will comply with the use and dimensional requirements of the ordinance. They are requesting a dimensional adjustment for height as discussed, and we recommend that you grant that, given that they will be providing mixed use as an amenity. And we don't foresee any negative environmental impacts. This will be a buildable lot upon merging, and adequate pedestrian access will be provided from Brook and Waterman Street, as well as Phones Alley. So based on that, we recommend that you approve the master plan, subject to the conditions that you grant the dimensional adjustment for height, that you grant the design waiver that the applicant apply for an administrative subdivision to merge the lots, and vote to approve the master plan, finding it to be in conformance with the ordinance and comprehensive plan.
Okay, thank you, Troyan. With that, we're going to open the public comment section of this hearing. If you're joining us virtually, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 if you're calling in. We have a sign-in sheet. We have one person here from the sign-in sheet, but I'm going to defer to the councilwoman who's here present because I believe she wants to speak on this agenda item as well.
If I can speak after Councilman Gonzalez, who is on.
Okay, and he is on and he has his hand raised as well. So we will go to the councilman joining us virtually.
And commissioners, you did receive a letter from both of the council people earlier today.
Along with, I should state at this time that we did receive other public comment on this written. So if you did submit something in advance, we are in receipt of that and we have reviewed it prior to this meeting as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilman. We can hear you.
All right, Councilman, what is it?
Okay. Is there a way that I can turn my camera on or?
Yeah, I can actually, Councilman, I will be happy to promote you to a panelist so that we can see you. And I'm going to ask Casali, can you guys stop sharing. Thank you. Okay, Councilman, you can turn your camera on now. Councilman Gonzalez, you should be able to turn your camera on. Can you hear us? Okay, working here. Hold on a second. There we go. I think you're coming in. There you go.
Hi, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you, Chairman Kazdaco. Thanks, Bob, and members of the commission. For the record, my name is John Gonsalves, and I'm the councilman for Ward 1. I represent the area for the proposed development at 116 Waterman Street and 232 Brook Street. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak on this matter, and I appreciate Attorney Garrahy coming to a recent Ward 1 community meeting to educate the community about this proposed development. I apologize for not being there in person, but I'm happy to do so virtually. I really appreciate the thoughtful presentation by the applicant today. However, I'm here to share that I've heard from countless constituents in the neighborhood, and I'd like to join them in opposition to granting the applicant the dimensional adjustment for height for a slew of reasons, and I can list those reasons, but one is it establishes in many of the neighbors' opinions a dangerous precedent for the College Hill neighborhood in terms of massing and scale. Additionally, we take issue with the raising and demolition of the two existing structures in order to build something taller. If the developer decides to move forward with this project, considering this proposed mixed-use development is permitted by right in the C2 zone, we do believe that the applicant should comply and stay within the reasonable height of 50 feet and 4 stories permitted by right, and ultimately not granted the 61 feet in 5 stories. We believe this because an additional story in height means an overall potential of 50 additional students to this immediate area, which will further diminish and undermine the quality of life for the abutters and residents in this neighborhood. And unfortunately, the current property at this site has had many issues that we consistently hear about, including an extraordinary amount of trash, litter, rodents, and the neighborhood does not necessarily have confidence that this will change, especially if you add additional height units or students on this particular property. While the applicant's also exempt from parking requirements, abutting businesses are also largely concerned about the parking challenges that this will create for their businesses. And as such, we think it's appropriate for the developer to conduct a parking and shadow study to determine the implications of this parking on parking and shadows on abutting properties. Regardless of the studies, we are respectfully requesting that the commission deny the dimensional adjustments on height, and we believe that the developer should consider offering new plans, which would include a reduced massing and scale that complies with the height of 50 feet and 4 stories permitted by right. Additionally, we're respectfully requesting that the commission consider continuing this matter or potentially denying the dimensional adjustment, and also putting a halt on the administrative subdivision to merge the subject plots until the developer is willing to address some of these neighborhood concerns and present to the neighborhood association and some of the abutters a plan that's more in line with the 50 feet and 4 stories by right, given all of the aforementioned reasons. So I just want to share that, and I thank you so much for your time and your consideration this evening.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Anthony.
Good evening. Oh, is this on?
I think so. I think you just have to speak to it.
I'm sorry.
Just speak closer to it, I think.
Can you hear me now? Great. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Again, I always start by thanking you for the very hard work you do for our city. The fact that you've been so extraordinarily busy of late, we really appreciate everything you do and value your work greatly. I am Helen Anthony, the City Councilwoman for Ward 2. And I am here to follow up on the comments made by my fellow councilman, John Gonsalves, and also to the comments contained in the letter to the commission from the College Hill Neighborhood Association, which should also be in your packet. I know you've heard this from me quite a bit, but on College Hill, we are trying to maintain a very delicate balance between universities, business, and the surrounding neighborhoods. And it's been really hard. Brown is constantly building and expanding, which creates a need for student housing and businesses that cater to the university and to the community. The only way we are able to maintain this delicate balance is to enforce and strengthen our zoning in that particular area. I'd like to focus my comments on the request for the dimensional adjustment on the height. This project is right on the border of the C2 zone. And I have been before this commission many times on projects that are in this area in particular. And I think we have to maintain our border. An extra floor should not be allowed. There is residential across the street. And I believe that the height disparity, which will occur with the addition of the floor, will be stark, and that the transition to the abutting residential neighborhood will be abrupt. And if anyone can just think about what's going on in Brook in general, we have the mixed use building that was just constructed on the corner of Brook and Euclid, which is a block and a half from this proposed project. That building is only 4 stories, not 5. We've got the residential dorm going up on Brook. We're almost building a wall of buildings right up to the street that are occurring on Brook. And I think we really cannot allow this project to be an additional story. You know, I understand it's within the purview of the City Plan Commission to grant these height adjustments, but I think it's done to encourage mixed-use development in certain areas. And I would argue that we don't need that incentive in this area. Mixed-use buildings, such as the one on Brook and Euclid, are being built without additional floors. I would assume that it would be more profitable for the proponent to rent to more students, but it's certainly not our role to make that project more profitable. And so I am going to request that you do not grant the height adjustment. I'm also very, very worried that we are going to create a precedent in this area, and we just can't afford to do that. So thank you for your time, and I hope you'll consider my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Anthony. We do have one other person who signed up on the sign-in sheet, Stephen.
Yep.
Stephen Hamburg, 110 Lloyd Avenue. And I want to endorse what both council members mentioned. And I just want to both reiterate a couple of points and add a few. So one is, I think we have to also be careful in the math here. So what we really have is 7 floors that the tenants will use. So you have the basement where there's an apartment, you have 5 floors of apartments, and a 7th roof that's an active part of the amenities of the building. So they're talking about developing literally things on 7 different floors that are actively part of the package. So it's important. They did present to the neighborhood that they're only adding 1 floor, but it is 6 floors of people living. So I think we have to be careful on the math. In addition, it's really important to note that, as I said with the parking, there's an acute parking issue in the area. There are currently 8 parking spots on the property. Those will be eliminated. The density will increase by at least 2.5 times. So the parking, and then they have made the assertion at the neighborhood association that students don't have cars. The applicant has many properties. the overwhelming majority of them provide parking that are actively used by the students being rented to. So I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that parking won't become more intense and more problematic with such a high intensity building. And if you add the additional bedrooms, so there are 25 units, of which 2 bedrooms, 50 bedrooms in the project. So they're asking for the variance for providing only a small amount of retail, 1/4 of 1 floor, which they make up for in the basement by adding a unit. So effectively, they've given up no units of rental in exchange for 2 units, 2 additional floors of use, 1 level of apartments and a roof, and still having the common area in the basement, which is actively part of the amenities. So I think that all matters in terms of the intensification and the problems that will exacerbate in the neighborhood. I'd also mention the street tree. First of all, there is no street trees adjacent to this property at this time. The large tree in front of that property could not coexist with the building. It had died a couple years ago and it was removed by the city. There were trees on the east side of the property that have been, I believe, removed already, or they're there. And you have a major conflict between street trees and this design because of the overhangs. And given its intensity, the noise and the air pollution, you would absolutely should request that there be trees all the way around the perimeter to soften the view. That is not possible with the current design because of the overhangs. You're going to have conflict there. There are no overhead wires, so it's an ideal place for street trees, and there could be a lot done with that. And then I would just add one last thing, which is, and I realize this is not by ordinance, but there is a definition of dormitory in the regs. I realize it doesn't meet it in letter, but it absolutely meets it in spirit. It's adjacent to Brown property. It's adjacent to a Brown dormitory. It should be viewed through that lens because effectively that is what it will be. And so I think the idea here is to see, is this an appropriate density use and application? And I would suggest it's not. And by right, they can develop the property, but I would strongly encourage you not to grant the easement over the right of way or the additional floors to exacerbate the problems that the other speakers have already detailed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is the only person here in this room that signed up. Is there anyone else here before we open it up to the virtual who would like to speak on this matter? Okay, I believe we have Nina Markov. You'll be up next. Please unmute yourself and introduce yourself now.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Nina Markov. I'm here representing the College Hill Neighborhood Association.
Nina, we can't hear you very well. Could you maybe speak louder into the computer's microphone?
Yes, I always have this problem. Is this better?
It is better, yeah.
Okay, I apologize. Let me know again if you can't hear me. I actually am going to be brief because everybody else has already enumerated all of the concerns so well, council people as well as Steve. I'm just here basically to absolutely agree with all of the points made, and just to add that we don't think that the variances should be granted. It seems the potential for the noise and trash problems at this property are huge, and if we had our confidence that the smaller properties were being maintained well, then maybe we wouldn't be as concerned about this giant property. But I do think that the trash, even with the trash room proposal, which seems good, but given the problems at other properties owned by student housing developers, I'm very concerned about the impact that the already horrendous trash and noise problems already have on neighbors. And I don't think anybody's mentioned that the top floor, which seems like potentially, which is going to be like, I presume, an open space, which will almost certainly be used for parties, which will add a huge amount of noise and also seems really dangerous to me to have a bunch of college students up that high. So I guess I just I'll stop there. I just agree that in asking you not to grant the waivers. Thank you.
Thank you. We have, I believe, one more.
Yep.
Who's raised their hands?
Yeah,
Again,
it
if
looks
you're-
like Haley.
While we promote Haley, if you're here and you want to comment on this matter, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 if you're calling in. Okay, Haley, please state your name for the record and after you unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Haley Buckey, Buckey. I live on 24 Evergreen Street in Providence. I support this apartment proposal, and I would encourage you to grant all of the dimensional adjustments being applied for. It's not true, and I'm tired of people stereotyping that the only thing a top floor can be used as is partying, because I literally live on the top floor of a building right now, and it's fine. I don't party here. I just live here. I sleep here, and I go to work. Same with my roommate, who is a physics grad student. So I would just also encourage people to not dehumanize and stereotype students and not automatically associate race with particular people. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else joining us virtually who?
Nobody else.
Okay. With that, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item. I think I'd like to start by asking Attorney Garrahy back up briefly, just to respond. It's not every day where we have not one but two council people coming out in opposition of a matter. I should note for the record that some of the public comment we received was in support of this, not just the person who called in. So it's not all opposition, but your client, the applicant, is well known in this town. And is there anything you would like to add? Context, color, anything
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
to
this?
So let me, he is well known, and you know, there's students living on the east side, okay, and they're in this area. There's an intention here to bring them into this commercial zone and perhaps out of some of the residential areas where there's more complaints. And this is an area that's zoned for this use. This is where they should be. And, you know, I know there's non-conforming multifamilies in the residential zones, and as a result, there's issues resulting from that. This is an appropriate place for this multifamily dwelling. It's an appropriate place. The computer center is a high rise right across the street. Minden Hall, if I got that right, is a high rise right across the street. So this is an appropriate place for this type of a structure. It's not out of character. It's the zone says 4 stories plus 2 additional stories if you have amenities such as commercial use on the first floor. We're asking for 1 additional story. So it's an appropriate use for this type of a structure, as well as multifamily dwelling. So I understand that, you know, there's you know, students are not always on their best behavior, but this is where they should be. And so I get the fact that the community is not always excited about having more students in this area. I get that point totally. But this is Brown University, and they need housing. The students need housing. This is a new facility. It's a modern facility that's going to be appropriate for housing of students and others. It's not a dormitory. It's a multifamily dwelling, which will include students and may include others. So it's not a dormitory. So I understand the apprehensive nature of this, but it's zoned appropriate. It's where the city says, look, this is where we want you to put this structure. And if you give us commercial use on the first floor, you're entitled to more height. So it's an appropriate location for this use.
Thank you, Attorney. Any other questions of the attorney before we have?
John, I just wondered, how many stories is the Minden? Must be about eight, right?
I counted 8, I think.
And then how about the Biological Sciences Library? That's certainly,
That's the highest point in the city of Providence.
12 anyway,
The top of that building is higher than
Cannabis.
it's the highest point in the city of Providence.
Right, so
Yeah.
it's not an inappropriate height. I mean,
No, I understand.
Right.
I just
Right.
wondered.
Are there any other questions for the applicant's representative? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney Gary. So I don't hate the design. I think if you looked at this building and it was the lot next door that he was building this on, they wouldn't be asking us for the design waiver on the on the second frontage street. And I believe he meets the intent because it does look consistent from that Waterman face and the Brook facing portions of the street. So I have no issue with that. And I think I tend to agree with Attorney Gary. We talk about where we don't want students, but there has to be a place where we have them. I am concerned, and I implore the applicant to continue to work with your councilman, have more neighborhood meetings to discuss the outstanding issues before coming back to us if we do approve this tonight. That's definitely a concern of mine. We have a lot of a very strong contingent of the city council that doesn't want this project to be built. And it's because of concerns they have with the applicant. So I think the applicant should take every step possible. I know they did attend one community meeting, but I think continuing to dialogue with the neighbors and the neighborhood associations would be very, very important to the continued success of this project. I think this is what we want in this area. I think we're trying not to incentivize people to build this type of housing in other parts of the city. This is kind of the main area where we want this. I actually like the roof deck. I'd like to hang out there. It's kind of cool. What are your thoughts?
I'll go first. My observations, I guess, the two large buildings across the street are all set off the road a good bit, so they don't encroach on they don't feel like they encroach on the right of way either. And I do think, especially on Brook Street, that it's right up there, and it would add to that feeling of it looks really big to me, the design. Looking at it on Google here, it's like it will be a very massive building on the corner. And then one question I had was was there a reason to grant the 20-foot waiver, the waiver for the no residential on the first floor on the Brook Street side? The residential component on Brook Street on the.
So that I believe it's because it faces two main streets. And they're putting a portion of the commercial unit on they're putting it facing Waterman.
Right.
But they're not continuing the entirety of that first floor. So that therefore they have to request the waiver. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because the reason is that there will be a residential use within 20 feet of the lot line along Brook Street. And it'll be on that portion of Brook that slopes upward. And, you know, in our opinion, or my opinion anyway, it doesn't seem practical to incorporate a commercial use into that area because the first floor gradually diminishes as you head up to the north. So, and I think as the chair mentioned, if this were mid-block, they would comply because the entire frontage on Waterman meets the requirement.
No, each one of these applications is a case-by-case basis. We've granted similar waivers to other projects for both the height and the 20-foot no residential. There was one comment in the public comment about the commercial use not taking up the entire first floor, and therefore they shouldn't be entitled to the height. I don't believe, Bob, you can correct me on this, but I don't believe that is actually defined, the percent that's required to request the additional height.
Yeah, it's not the standard doesn't speak to the amount of ground floor commercial use or the amount. It simply says, if you give me a second, I'll read the language. It's the apologize.
No problem.
It says you can grant. We're talking about the fifth story.
Mm-hmm.
It's a dimensional adjustment, and it says that you have the authority to make the adjustments when one or more of the following occur. There's a whole series of them, but the one that's relevant here is where mixed-use development is provided, of which at least 50% is devoted to residential use. So it doesn't specify how much commercial on the ground floor gets you that additional story.
Thank you.
But it is your discretion. You don't have to. You're not obligated to approve this. You have the authority to approve it.
I have a question about. We've had these situations before where we've approved the adjustments, the dimensional adjustments at this point, and then we've seen the preliminary plan, and we've kind of rethought or something about the preliminary plan was just made us change our mind, but where our hands were tied by the fact that we granted these adjustments at this point. Is there any language that we can use to pull them back at preliminary planning? That's it. Just I know that we've been in this point on similar types of projects, and we got in a master plan, and we were just like, hey, wait, we're not talking about the adjustments anymore. We're talking about the preliminary plan.
Well, master plan vets the massing, the size, the program, more or less. And I believe, and the staff can definitely correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be, but in order to do that, we would have to have specific conditions of approval for the master plan tied directly to that specific issue.
Well, I think first of all, I don't believe there's anything obligating you to approve the waivers or the dimensional adjustments at master plan. That might make an approval a little bit complicated in the sense that you could say the use is, you do have to make findings relative to zoning. So that is a question. Does it have to, do you have to grant the waiver and the adjustment in order for you to make the finding of zoning approval? I'm going to take a quick peek at the regulations.
While you look at that, someone talked about that unit in the basement. I looked at it, I was looking at that, I was thinking about that, and I personally don't believe that that's gonna be a viable, unless they move it to the other side of the hallway, because do you want to be in the apartment next to the trash room where people are dropping bags of trash from the 5th floor in the next room? I mean, they'd have the soundproofing in that would have to be amazing, and then they're gonna run a compactor. So, I mean, I'm willing to wager that unit doesn't make it to the preliminary plan. So I'm willing to wager that's not a viable unit. It would just be, I mean, that's a tough, and you know, it's next door to a restaurant, and the trash in the restaurant, and you know, the trash room is great intentions, but keeping rodents out of places they want to go, not easy.
Mr. Chair. So the Subdivision and Land Development Enabling Act allow you to approve master plan contingent on either a variance or a zoning change. So in that case, you wouldn't be able to find the project at the moment perfectly consistent with zoning. But you could, we're in the middle of a public meeting, ma'am. Where do you need to go? The building is, only this place is open right now for a public meeting. The rest of the building is closed. Lev, would you mind just kind of advising her? Thank you. So I believe, you know, if you did have questions, Mr. Potter, about, you know, whether the building changes, but you've already kind of made a decision, you could do a couple of things. You could say something to the extent that the adjustment and the waiver are granted contingent on nothing changing on the exterior of the building, so that it wouldn't be kind of you know, they come back to you with a completely different building that you're not happy with. You could also withhold approval of those 2 discretionary approvals until preliminary plan. Your master plan approval could say that it would be contingent on them, your approval is contingent on the waiver and the dimensional adjustment being granted at the preliminary plan stage, but make no assurances that they're going to get that, because that's still at your discretion.
I mean, I'm comfortable with, you know, a wide range of things here. I was just wondering if this is something that we should consider. I'm also comfortable with making it contingent on, like the chair said, the applicant doing some more outreach into the community and coming back and addressing some of those concerns at preliminary plan stage. I don't know how everyone else feels about this, but I know that I felt helpless in previous meetings where we were like, we're only voting on the preliminary plan because we granted the dimension already, and we've gotten to the point where, as a group, we unanimously approved the master plan, and then we got the preliminary plan, and we were like, we have reservations now, and we didn't, we tied our own hands. And so I don't, I guess I'm asking the other commissioners.
Sorry, my microphone was off. I'd definitely be comfortable moving forward with this, with a few conditions of approval, which would be, you know, the need to meet, to set up another neighborhood meeting with Councilman Gonzalez and the neighborhood to continue to dialogue about the concerns, and contingent on granting of the dimensional variances at the preliminary plan phase. The other uses are by right. We'd have trouble denying those at this phase, I think. And again, I think it's an appropriate use of this area of Providence.
You know, I'd like to ask, if I could, the architect to come back and explain to me the difference between the rendering and the drawing on the elevation showing the parapet wall. Because it looks as though above this roof is going to go a parapet, I guess. I just can't, I can't figure it out. So is there a parapet? That's what I don't know.
Can we have, yes, can we have the architect come back to answer Harry's question, specific to Harry's question? We have the renderings in our packet. I think that's probably sufficient.
Yeah, on the front, on the front, we have the beautiful proposed view. And then several pages in, there's I guess it's an elevation of the proposed, north elevation. And I can't figure out on top of, in other words, on top of this, is there a parapet wall that's 6 or 8 feet high? What goes on up there where there's going to be, you know, benches and recreation area? So in fact, does this picture not show us the actual height? I don't see where I can show it.
You're looking on both the east and the west elevation, it looks like, right, Harry?
I'm just at the, yes, east and north, correct.
So I think a lot of it has to do with just the proposed view, because of how far up rendering anyways.
Okay.
It is that we have a 42-inch high.
His microphone's not working.
Built around.
Hang on one second. Your microphone's not working.
42-inch high.
Try and turn it on again, Troy. It may have timed out. Just try and turn it on, because I think it has I think it times out after a while. It may be dead, but let's at least try that. No, it's not working. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just speaking as loud as you can.
Maybe over on this side because the owl is here. Do you mind coming on this side? Just
Yeah, maybe
sit
sit at that chair at the end of the table, but you'll have to speak loud enough for the stenographer to hear.
Okay. So the idea is, I guess, the rendering itself, because you're looking at it from such an angle coming down, you're not going to see the 42-inch high knee wall that we have along the upper roof deck, obviously for protection, you don't fall over and meet that code wise. So that's what you're seeing faintly dashed up ahead on that elevation.
And so is the knee wall set back from the edge?
Yeah, the knee wall is set back from the edge.
Is there also a below grade, or is this just the way that the street grades for the east and west elevation along I guess you call it the lower level and the cellar?
Yeah, the cellar level would be below grade.
But there are no cutouts from grade down into that cellar level to get light or air or anything like that.
There is lighting down on that east elevation, and on the west elevation, we do have some lighting into that proposed unit that's down there.
But that's just utilizing the current grades?
Yeah.
There's no, okay. Does that answer your question, Harry?
Well, I guess it does. I know, I can see what you're saying. I just, we've been talking about height and number of floors and, I guess it does answer my question.
My question is, it looks like we're only including the height up to the roof level.
Yeah.
As it's drawn here in the picture, in the elevation. It looks like with all the structures on the roof, we gain another 8 to 10 feet. Does that not count toward the height?
It doesn't count unless roof structures add up to more than 50% of the area of the roof. And I don't believe they do in this case.
Would the parapet wall or the knee wall, that extra 3.5 feet?
That doesn't count towards building height.
Thank you.
Yes, one other, I wondered if there's any way to, I think there is. I'd love to see some trees around this building. The project on Hope Street and Waterman has come out in an excellent way. I mean, it's certainly I think one of the nicer looking buildings that's been built on the east side, actually. And there was a lot of battle, but it came out as a wonderful looking building, and it has wonderful planting around it. So I'd love to see some kind of, even if there are certain trees that like to grow in a vertical manner. And I'd love to see some trees on the street, just to, as one of the gentlemen said, just to lighten it up, or actually it'd be green, wouldn't it? If there were deciduous trees.
At the street level,
Yeah,
not
it would help-
necessarily
it would
just at
help.
the roof deck.
It would help block the bright sunlight in the, which is going to get a lot of sun, a lot of eastern light, a lot of southern light. It would, might reduce your air conditioning costs in the summer and reduce the heating costs in the winter. What do you think, John?
No problem.
So it sounds like we have a couple of potential additional recommendations, or in addition to the recommendations by the planning staff, we're looking to make if we were to vote in favor of this, we would be making it contingent upon the granting of the dimensional adjustments, the 2 requested dimensional adjustments at preliminary plan phase, contingent upon the continued dialogue with your city council representative and constituents well, it's his constituents, it's your neighborhood groups. And adding more, working with the city forester to exceed the canopy coverage requirements to provide more street level trees in addition to the proposed roof area. Are those the three that we're looking at?
Can you repeat the first two? We're not granting dimensional adjustment now.
It would be, we would be punting the recommendations 1 and 2 and instead making it contingent upon, making the master plan approval contingent upon the granting of the dimensional adjustments, which means that we're
Just one dimensional adjustment and then the design waiver.
sorry, dimensional, the requested dimensional adjustment and design waiver. Thank you for that clarification.
I'm actually okay with the design waiver. I just want the height.
Okay,
Yeah, the design waiver was fine.
so it would just be the dimensional
I'd
adjustment.
like to keep the other one.
Oh,
Okay, and the design waiver.
Thank you.
And the need to better address the council persons and the neighborhood's concerns about the project by holding at least one more meeting in good faith with Councilman Gonzalez.
so moved. Can we do that? So moved.
We may be
Yeah,
overruled here.
I think maybe, I don't think you can require them to meet with the council person. I think you can require another community meeting and suggest that the council person may be able to facilitate that meeting.
So we will change that that condition of master plan approval to exactly
As stated.
as stated.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Let's go around. Christian,
Aye.
Noel,
Aye.
Harry,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So the matter is closed. We will continue to work hard on this project. And with that,
I make a motion to adjourn.
thank you, Harry. Do we have a second?
Aye. Me. Second.
All right. Thank you very much.
That's all.